Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, and you're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Ian David Graham. Ian David Graham was born of Scottish parents in southwest England. For the last 39 years, he has worked as a channeler for an entity called White Bull. He has worked in several countries and has published 2 books. The first one, entitled God is Never Late, but Never Early Either, was published in 8 languages. Both it and the second book, There is Nothing Miraculous About a Miracle, to be republished shortly in English. More recently, he has led tours to Egypt, Dolphin Safaris in the Red Sea, and to Bhutan, and for the last few years, he has led retreats on the Greek island of Patmos, the holy island of the Aegean. I'm not sure if I say that right. Welcome to the podcast, Ian.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes. So you have you do something very different than most people do. You know, growing up, I'm going to be a fireman or something.
Yeah. Well, I had all kinds of ideas things I wanted to be, but none of them worked out. My father was a doctor, and his, of course, ambition for me was to be a doctor like him, and also to play rugby for Scotland. These are his 2 ambitions for me. But as I faint at the sight of blood and I can't catch a ball to save my life, I was always going to disappoint. So maybe it was good for him in a sense, and for me, that he died when I was very young, because I was certain to be a disappointment to him. So I was born in Devon in the southwest of England, and then after he died, my family moved back to Scotland, my mother, my sister, and myself. And I was sent to a private school. I don't know whether any of your listeners will have been watching the series The Crown on television about the British royal family. Well, there's an episode that shows a school where the Duke of Edinburgh and where Prince Charles went. When I was born, my name was put down for this school, right in the north of Scotland. But by the time I was 4, my parents realized I wasn't cut out for cold showers every morning, so they took my name off the list. And I ended up going to actually a day school in Edinburgh. But I still refer to it as a kind of Philistine institution where, unless you were good at rugby or climbing mountains, they weren't really interested in you. And I was always in the back row of the school play. So I was as far apart from the school philosophy as I could be. And I was an outsider. I never really fitted in. I didn't know why, but I think I could have easily done without those 6 years at school. I could have learned much more, probably life. And then I wanted to be an actor. But before I actually left home, I went to work for 9 months in India, in the Himalayas, in an educational establishment that my grandfather had started for destitute children. I returned back to Britain and went off to London. Didn't succeed in becoming an actor. And my first job actually was a lift operator in Harrods department store. And somebody said, well, Ian, that was your first job, taking people to a higher level. So I remember clearly in my script, first floor, everything for ladies and babies. But actually for me, rather than take people higher, the most important thing is to bring people down to earth. For me, that's just as important as sending them off into the ethers. And a whole range of work opportunities came my way. I taught English to foreigners. I worked in shops. I was the administrator of a touring opera company, and all the time my school friends were, going to their universities and becoming lawyers and doctors. And so when people said to me, "What are you doing now, Graham?" And I said, "Oh, I'm working in a shop." "Oh, really?" Because my family didn't know what to do with me. And then when I was in my 27, 28, I fell in love. And it was a disaster, as usual. And it's the story of my life. So, and so a friend said to me, "Why don't you learn to meditate? Maybe this will sort of make you feel better." And so I found this place in London, which had the awful name, the House of Spirit. Now, a good Church of Scotland boy and the House of Spirit is not a very good match, but I went. And I think I lasted 3 weeks because people were talking about possessions and past lives and guides and all this kind of stuff. And this was just too far out for me. And so I decided to leave. And I began meditating at home. And it wasn't long after I started that I started getting this voice in my head. And I thought I was going crazy. Somebody said to me, well, when you pray to God, when you talk to God, it's called praying, but when God talks to you, you're schizophrenic. I thought, yeah, I'm getting mad, But he was giving me some advice, and it wasn't wonderful advice, but it's certainly I didn't know where it was coming from. Then I met somebody, and he told me about the wife of a colleague of his who started channeling this Indian. And my reaction was, oh, Bill, come on, be careful. This is dangerous stuff. This is hocus pocus. Don't have anything to do with it. But some seed of curiosity was sown in my mind at that time. And a few months later, still with my broken heart, I agreed to have a meeting with this spiritual teacher. We called him Teacher. Just Teacher, that was his name. And I wasn't very impressed. It didn't give me many answers that I wanted to hear. And so I left it. But for some reason, now I know the reason, but at that time I didn't. Again, a few months passed. I had another meeting with him. And he said, you have to join my group. I have to develop you. And I had no idea what that meant. So being a good boy, doing what I'm told, I went along to this house. And there was a small group of people there. They had been sitting together for 18 months. And I was the new boy, completely green, wet behind the ears. I knew nothing about this stuff. The only thing I did know was that I'd already been told I had the gift of healing. And I'd done a little bit of that with my hands. Anyway, the first day I was there, we meditated. And as soon as I closed my eyes, I found myself in an Indian camp, as clear as I'm looking at you as this room. And then Teacher began to speak through his medium from the other side of the room. Began to describe to me all the things that I was seeing in my meditation. And it was quite basic information like, oh, that's my teepee, those are my horses, and that's the hills where we go hunting. Mm-hmm. And then the camera panned around, and there was a big Indian standing under a tree. He said, and that one over there, that's my friend White Bull, and he's going to work with you. And then I remembered that when this voice came in my head earlier on, I heard the name White Bull, but I dismissed it because I think my first record when I was 7 or something was a song called A Little White Bull. So I thought, oh, this is just a sort of memory from the past. Anyway, I was a bit taken aback with this information. And a few weeks later, we were meditating again. And suddenly I had the sensation of my face changing, like I was getting high cheekbones, like you often see portraits of the Indians. And my hands became very big and my body began to fill out. And in those days, I was still smoking. So I could say this happened 38 years and 35 kilos ago. Because I put on quite a bit of weight since then. And then this voice came out and said, I'm White Bull, and I couldn't stop it. And at that moment, deep, deep down, I knew, yeah, this is what I've come to do. This is why I've come to Earth. But my ego had a different agenda. So it wasn't so easy willing to accept having to surrender to this unknown. And as I'm a devout skeptic, it was so far removed from anything I'd ever come across before. But I went on with it. And here I am 39 years later, still doing it, having maybe done 20,000 sessions and traveled around, done 2 books. And so it's been quite a journey. But the amazing thing is, since White Bull came into my life, I haven't had to lift a finger to make anything happen. Well, of course, I have problems like everybody else. I'm not saying I don't have the same problems. But when it comes to where I live, my work, everything has just flowed in the most magnificent way. So in that sense, it's been a real blessing. But we have on and off stages of our relationship. Sometimes I rebel again and I feel tired. And I think, what about me? It's my life, because it's a demanding job, but one that thankfully makes a contribution to other people's lives. But it meant a complete change in my social life and my family life because, my family are just not into this kind of things. And my friends, when I first told them, they kind of, their eyes glazed over, basically, they were not interested. So it was a complete change and really having to let go of all that had been stable in my life. And so it was quite a dramatic turning point.
Yes. And so this channeling, where you're channeling White Bull.
Yeah.
I, like maybe a lot of the listeners, think, okay, so you're channeling White Bull, but you've made a life out of channeling and obviously sharing it with people. Why would people come to hear White Bull?
Well, very good question. I mean, the question I also ask myself is, why me? Why am I doing this? Because it's like asking a Jewish rabbi to become a pork butcher. I'm so completely opposite of this kind of work. And some of your listeners might have heard about the Course in Miracles. It's a very famous text. And the woman who channeled it, I have great sympathy with her, because she first of all heard this voice in her head saying, please take notes, this is a Course in Miracles. And she was a research scientist. Mm-hmm. And after a while she said, listen, why me? I didn't ask to do this, I don't believe in this stuff, I don't want to be doing it, why me? And the voice came back and said, because we knew you would do it. And I think that probably was why I'm doing it, because again, my discipline and from my childhood, you do what you're told. But people come for all kinds of reasons. White Bull is a spiritual teacher. And people come, of course, about their private lives, their relationships, but they also come about their spiritual journey and how to heal, how to evolve, how to become more conscious, how to discover what's in the way of their journey. So it's a whole range of subjects and a whole range of people. And and it's all happened by word of mouth. It's just spread. It started with one client, and now, as I said, I've done 20,000 sessions. So it's people come for the wisdom. And I'm still a bit skeptical. I trust myself, but the thing that always reassures me that I'm doing my job well is when people say to me, "Oh, the love." And you can fake a lot of things, but you can't fake love. And even before he begins to speak, there's a presence that comes, which I'm not aware of course, because I'm kind of away with the fairies at that point. And that for me affirms that actually, yes, I'm doing something all right there, because love is what people want, and the love is what heals people.
Yeah. So what kind of questions would people ask, and how would White Bull answer that? Like, what are they seeking for?
I mean, when I go into a trance, people come and I go into a trance, and I have a kind of ritual that I do within myself. And the way I try to describe it is, I'm a British person living in the Netherlands, and I'm a bit addicted to the BBC. I must have my radio on my pillow. It's like my comfort blanket. I have to listen to the English voice. But sometimes the BBC do the unforgivable on the program I listen to. They take the news off and they put cricket in its place. Uh-huh. Now, watching cricket is bad enough, but listening to it is a nightmare. So I change my radio to another frequency, I get another program. So what I describe that I'm doing is that when I close my eyes to go into this altered state, it's like I'm changing my frequency. So now you're hearing Ian, but when I go through my ritual, you'll be hearing White Bull. And actually, I'm not too attached to the idea of this big Indian coming into me. For me, the name White Bull simply represents a level of consciousness. And it's much wiser than I am. For example, I think probably already I've said quite a few times. He never does that because he doesn't have to think. He's got a great advantage. It's just consciousness just flows. So people come, and because I don't remember what's been said for me after a session, it's like waking up from a dream. People come to talk about all the things that life can bring, and obviously relationship problems is a big thing, and people's spiritual paths, and all kinds of things. I can't really be too specific about it. Mm-hmm. But he brings the higher view, so he doesn't indulge people at the level of their mind, but he has a kind of bird's eye view of people's lives, and he's connecting to a part of them, their higher self. So as he always says, that basically all he's doing is reflecting back to them their own highest and deepest knowing. And often people said, well, it was wonderful, but actually, I have to admit, I knew it all already. So he puts you in touch with what you deeply know, but you can't access. He comes and he blows away the cobwebs and the dust that conceal your deeper knowing. So, and it's not about, he's not a fortune cookie, he doesn't make predictions. is just wisdom, love and wisdom about anything in life. And it was interesting when the first book came out, so many people said to me, "Oh, it's just like you wrote that book just for me. Everything I wanted to know was in that book. Thank you so much. You wrote that book for me." So many people said that. But it's a universal wisdom that actually probably anybody could relate to on all kinds of subjects. And every teacher has their own speciality, their own philosophy, if you say, so to speak. Some people would say that it's rather like Advaita. It's about the union, the oneness of all. And sometimes he draws a lot upon, because I have a Christian background, so he draws a lot upon the Christian teachings, not in a religious orthodox sense. Sometimes Buddhism, and that's because what's in my head, such as it is, not that much, are the raw materials that he can use to illustrate what he's trying to say. Yeah. I've spent a lot of time in Buddhist countries, so maybe he will include some Buddhist wisdom and philosophy. Sometimes it's just plain common sense, So it can be a whole range of levels that he can communicate with people. But I think one of the great things about him is that he's able to, whoever comes, whatever level of consciousness they have, he meets them at their level. So I have a friend who knows him very well. She's a therapist, and sometimes she will send her clients to Whitehall. And she listens to the sessions afterwards. And she said, it's amazing how different he is with every single person. It's like he measures himself exactly to fit with that person's consciousness and where they are. But very often, the biggest impact of the reading is the love, is just the presence of the love. Mm-hmm. And he teaches a lot about how important it is that we are just a presence going through life, sharing the energy of that presence. And often people were saying, "Oh, but he makes it sound so simple." And so he doesn't come with big, long words. He couldn't, because I don't have big, long words in my head. But it's a very simple but pure teaching. Mm. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, it's quite special. And I think he's quite different also to a lot of other entities that speak, that he's not talking down from a higher place. He's completely face-to-face with the person, a direct meeting with that person. Mm-hmm. And very often people say they feel for the first time in their lives they felt truly seen. And that's, of course, a great gift to receive, if you feel truly seen by someone, seen and heard. Yeah. And he has absolutely no judgment, which also is easy for people, because one of the subjects he covers often is the inner judge. So many of us have an inner judge, and he has a wonderful way of healing people of that belief in the propaganda, the fake news, as he calls it, of the inner judge. Yeah, so it covers a lot of different subjects. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I understand more now that you've explained it, because I thought, wow, that's just really different. I've grown up in a Christian background also, and so we didn't really have anybody doing channeling. So the Holy Spirit.
But it's interesting though in my family, because my family on my father's side anyway has this very strong connection with India, Tibet, Bhutan, and very old family friends, Tibetan friends, Bhutanese friends, and Buddhists, of course, and they believe in reincarnation. And so for my family, it's absolutely fine to have a friend who believes in reincarnation, but to have a member of the family who believes in reincarnation or has these beliefs, that's a completely other thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm the black sheep of the family, really, because they don't know what to say to me. I don't know what to say to them either. I have to say, right. They're good people, but there's just, and this is also a story that often people come with, that they are rejected by their family or not seen by their family because they're on a spiritual journey, and that doesn't conform to the family ethos, or it's not in the family DNA even. Mm-hmm. I think what is in my family DNA is service. On my father's side, definitely service. And on my mother's side, duty.
Mm.
So it's quite a strong cocktail when those two come
Yeah,
together.
yeah,
They
it
both
is.
seem to have landed in me. So yeah, at least I've inherited that part of the DNA.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's talk about this very interesting part of your work where you're going on dolphin safaris and on the Holy Island, uh,
Patmos,
Patmos, and
the
where
Aegean.
St. John was. I mean, Patmos is where St. John
That's right. Yeah, yeah,
stayed
yeah.
and wrote Revelation, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's
Yeah.
nowhere more I like to be than in the cave where he received the revelations.
So,
And St. John is my spiritual master. That's why I go every year to Patmos because, yeah, I get moved even when I think about it.
mhm.
And it has been suggested that, in fact, White Bull, at the very highest level of himself, is in the energy of St. John. He did try to explain it, but I'm like I said, I'm very skeptical. So whenever I hear anybody saying they're channeling Jesus or Mary Magdalene or whatever, then I think, get real. I'm sure people are, but it's not my way of doing things. So I'm very happy I'm channeling plain Mr. Whitehall.
Mhm.
But St. John is central to my beliefs and my what makes my heart sing and so I go there, and I went the first time 25 years ago, and I've been, I think, 15 times since. And then I thought I would like to lead retreats here.
Mhm.
And so I've done this for a few years, and they're very successful. In fact, people come back and back because the energy is so wonderful. Patmos is amazing when you step off the ferry. It's not the easiest place to get to because there's no airport. Thank God, otherwise it would be overrun with tourists.
Mhm.
So you get a ferry there. I always get the slow ferry because then you get a much greater sense of pilgrimage. It stops on little islands. For me, it's a pilgrimage when I go there. And you step off the boat, and it's like walking into an energy field, and you see the building around the cave up the hill, then you see the wonderful monastery on top of the hill, the St. John the theologian. And so part of the retreat is we visit these places, we meditate there and enjoy the energy. My favorite place is this tiny little chapel, which, although it's on the tourist map, they don't go there because it's difficult to get to. Where apparently this is where St. John used to baptize people. And the atmosphere there, the peace, it's absolutely incredible. So by groups, we go there every day just to be in the stillness and peace of this little chapel. And there's some amazing places there. It's a beautiful island. So I'm going again in September. Thank God Greece is now welcoming tourists again because it was closed like a lot of other European countries. And I will go again also in the spring. And so I started doing these things because actually I was getting, I wouldn't say bored of doing the White Bull sessions, but I wanted to do something a bit different.
Mhm.
I wanted to do something that allowed me to be doing something rather than just disappearing for White Bull to come through me. And then with a friend, we started organizing trips to the Red Sea to go to this beautiful reef, swim with dolphins, and that's a very beautiful experience too. A week on a boat, every day, 2 or 3 times a day in the water, the beautiful warm water.
Mhm.
Sometimes having 100 dolphins swimming around you, and
Amazing.
it's wonderful, amazing. Sometimes they're not there; they're completely wild, so you can't ever guarantee they will be there. But sometimes they're just there; they're having fun. They're swimming around you, and the babies are there, and it's very special.
It's special.
Yeah, it's a wonderful experience. And then the trips to Bhutan, I organized because my family has a long history with Bhutan. In fact, I'm going next year, and not with a group by myself, because it'll be 100 years since my grandfather first went.
Wow.
So the Grahams have been going there ever since. We've got this long family history with Bhutan, which is quite rare. So next year I'm going to celebrate this centenary of the family association with Bhutan and see friends. And I've taken groups there because it's a very special place also. And although it's a country that's evolving very quickly from When I first went in 1972, I went at the end of the year, and I was the third visitor that year. Now they have several 100,000 a year, so it's changed a lot. But it still has something very, very special about it. Again, when you step off the aeroplane, after this incredible flight where you pass 4 of the 5 highest mountains in the world, again, it's like stepping into an energy field. It's very special. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, as people go on these trips with you and have this experience, how do you ever come home? I bet you're there. Thinking, I never want to go home.
Well, sometimes yes. I mean, Patmos I especially love. I think Patmos is almost my favorite destination. I love going to Bhutan on my own. I prefer to go on my own. I'm lucky. I can go as a guest anytime I want. I have an open invitation, which is special because otherwise you have to pay $250 a day. So that's quite an expensive holiday. So I'm lucky to be able to go. I'm very privileged in that sense. But yeah, people say to me, Bhutan, when are you coming to your second home? And certainly when I arrive in Patmos, I think I'm home. And, yeah, these are people that places that are very resonant in my soul. I connect with a part of me that's there. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I'm very, very blessed to be able to go to these places. Yeah.
So when people come home from their experience, how do they continue to be in that space or continue to evolve from there? Come back to day-to-day.
Well, I think it's interesting because it's different with each case. With Bhutan, it's a challenging trip because for most people it's something unlike they've ever been before. It's quite hard work because one is moving around, and now they have roads that are smooth, but it used to be very rough roads. And there's a lot to take in. And because of that insecurity that people sometimes felt in this strange land, there used to be a lot of quite complex group dynamics. And actually, I got a bit fed up with that, so that's why I'm not doing it again. I'm not very tolerant of group dynamics. But it did leave a deep impression on people. Egypt, yes, people who love dolphins love to go and swim with dolphins, so it's not such a big transition. But the people who come to Patmos, which is why they come back often year after year, they're so deeply touched by the atmosphere and the stories of St. John and what they feel there and what we do together. I have a simple program, but we have 2 silent days, and we go to the sacred sites, and I don't know, it just takes care of itself. People are just in this mildly altered state all the time. They're there because of I believe because of the energy of St. John. It's yeah, I can't tell you more. I think the impact of Patmos is probably the greatest of all. Yeah, because of simplicity, because of love, the love of St. John. That's how I feel it. Have you ever been?
So wonderful, so beautiful.
You should go. You should go. It's really a treat. It's I'll be your guide.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So this job you've been given, you said you didn't choose it, it chose you, this doing the channeling of White Bull. Do you ever kind of lose yourself, or what is the good and the bad when it comes to that? Maybe not, I don't want to say that, but what's the pros and the cons to what you're doing?
Well, I think one of the things, because I'm so skeptical, and one of the things I made very clear when I started the work, that White Bull would only come when I invited him. This was not a party piece. I wasn't going to be doing this to entertain people. I had a life too. So he had to respect me and not invade my space, because I know some people who allow that to happen, and I think, well, there's a little bit of ego here or something, because so I gave strict boundaries to White Bull for that, which he has respected, except once. And it's a rather embarrassing story to tell. I invited some friends to come and have dinner with me. I was living in London because we were going to watch, well, your listeners will know, a very important episode of Dallas.
Okay.
And it was the one who shot JR. So my friends all gathered and we went out for a bite to eat, and we came back, switched on the television, and the television didn't work. And it had been working perfectly before we went out. And then Whitehall came through and said, picture box is rubbish. That's what he said. That was his expression. But before that, I felt him coming. He said, "I'm sorry, guys, but I have to step aside. Something Whitehall will come through." So anyway, he came through, said something. I can't remember what it was. And then after he went, we went to put it on the television. And it worked perfectly, and there were the credits going up. So we never got to hear who shot JR.
Oh no!
That was the only time he's ever invaded my space. But the good thing is, I don't know how to put into words. Well, I've never had to think or plan anything in my life. It has just unfolded. It's been, I mean, I don't think I'm too much of a control freak, but I really had to learn to surrender in this. And talking about the family DNA, probably one thing I've inherited, I take no credit for it myself, is a faith that everything's going to work out all right. And it has. And I've moved countries twice. I've always had the most amazing places to live. In fact, I'm always worried to tell people what's happened to me, because they will say, "Oh, Ian, not another one of your stories," when some other bit of magical miracle happens in my life. And so, yeah, it's that's very nice. I meet wonderful people, amazing people. I love people. So for me to be able to meet so many interesting people is really a great gift. All kinds of people. Now, thanks to Skype, I'm doing sessions all over the world. So that's also nice. I like that. It's fulfilling a beautiful purpose. Although it probably sounds strange, it never crosses my mind that what I'm doing is helping people. I am. It's no way part of my conscious intention. I'm doing this because this is what I'm here to do. But I never think I'm helping people. And actually, I'm very grateful to Whitehall. He can be quite a strict teacher, especially when it comes to me. And in the early days, I got a lot of very positive feedback. And I started thinking, "Oh, I'm rather good at this. Yes, I'm a really good channeler." And every time I thought that, the next person would come and say, "I'm sorry, Ian, that was a waste of my time and money." As if to say, Whitehall was saying, "Hey, young man, remember, this is not you, it's me. So you're just the channel through which I come. Don't take the credit for yourself." And that was a wonderful teaching, because it meant that I get my feet on the ground. And I'm just the instrument. Something comes through me, but I take no credit for it myself. And I could never speak as wisely as he does. So yes, it's kept me grounded in spite of being a rather airy-fairy sort of job. I think I'm pretty grounded with it all. The downside is it's very tiring, and it asks for everything. You can't do it half-heartedly. So I think with a lot of vocational jobs, and I do call it's my vocation, what I feel called by God to do, you have to give it your everything, and therefore there's sacrifices involved, and it's hard work, and yeah, it's very tiring. So I have to take care of myself and not overdo it. I can't really think of any negative things, any cons actually. Fortunately, I think I've healed mainly the fear of what people might think about me, because I really am out on a limb in society. I live in a town in the Netherlands, which is like the spiritual capital of the Netherlands. And so it's the one place where if somebody asks me, "What do you do?" I can say what I'm doing confidently without fearing they will say, "Oh, you're doing the devil's work." So that's nice. And my friends, of course, know what I do. So But it does mean if I go into a party, somebody says, "What do you do?" I don't immediately say I'm a channeler, because they would just sort of quickly change the subject.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I say I'm a coach, I'm a healer, I'm a therapist. Yeah. Sometimes I say I belong to the second oldest profession in the world,
Mm-hmm.
because as long as there's been humanity, there's been somebody in the tribe whose task it has been to communicate spirit to people. So I mean, when Weibel was a Native American Indian, and in his people, doing his job, I'd be the most respected person in the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
But in our society, I'm kind of, weird and fringe and yeah. But I don't see channeling anyway as just something that people like me can do. I think we can all channel, not even another spirit. We can channel wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
There are moments, I'm sure many of your listeners will have had, where you're talking and suddenly you hear yourself saying something. I think, that sounds rather good. I wonder where that's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And we're connecting to something bigger than ourselves. And for me, that's channeling.
Mm-hmm.
You probably know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the ideal way to do it. I mean, for me, it may sound strange to say, but I think that channeling is a little bit old-fashioned. I think we need to learn to rely upon our own wisdom rather than looking outside of us. And I always tell people, always check within yourself that what you're hearing is true for you. Don't follow the advice just because Bible said it. It must feel true to you as well. Don't give your power away to a non-spiritual being because you think they know more than you do. It has to feel right for you too. I think that's one of the dangers also. People can so easily give their power away and get lost. And I think that maybe it's a quality of mine. I'm a very down-to-earth sort of guy. So, yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, you talked about how, your profession chose you, and you kind of, even though there was times of resistance, you kind of put that aside and you were flowing. How can people flow in their lives? Because I know I feel like I work on myself and do my meditation, but I still run into resistance. I run into resistance with my family members, or I run into resistance out in the world. How do we flow and be open to just flowing? Because there's so many also, worries, well, am I going to have a job tomorrow? Or what's going to happen to my child? We have all this going on in our heads.
As you say, it's all mind stuff. It's all mind stuff. And I think for me, and what's central to Weibel's teachings is how not to be always busy in the mind. Because then you become a slave of your mind. And what you want is your mind to be your servant. When you're connecting to a deeper truth, deeper wisdom, which will always take you forward to in an easier way. So I think if one wasn't to spend so much time in one's head, life would be easier. And spending less time in one's head also means trying not to spend too much time focusing on one's biography, because what happens in our head is also seeded in our early days. And so it's a bit of a cliche nowadays in spiritual circles, but it does help to be in the now. And all we need to know is present in the now. In fact, if we look back on all the happiest days of our lives, those are the moments when we are in the now. So, because why not then spend all the time in the now if they were the happiest moments? So we are depriving ourselves of all of this joy because we're slaves of our mind and conditioning and survival. And probably survival is the first program we learned. If we were born into a family where we were a little bit different, and we had to then create an ego because that would give us separation and difference, and we learned to survive. So I think it's also about, and I'm quoting Weibel's teachings here, to really work out what does freedom mean to one. and checking in every day. What is my soul hungry for today? I think it's about feeding the inner life, because an overactive mind is symptomatic of a hungry soul. So the moment your soul is well fed and that you're at peace of mind comes from that. And it could be very simple. It could be, what is my soul hungry for today? I'm going to go meet a friend for a drink, or I'm going to sit and stare at a blank wall for half a day, or I'm going to do the ironing and be present with that. There's so many different ways. It doesn't have to be obviously a spiritual thing, but I think when one takes care of one's inner life and makes peace of mind one's intention, one can even, if you're aware, oh, my head is so busy, my head is so full, then think, oh, hello, mind, thank you. Thank you for offering me the contrast of where I really want to be, which is peace of mind. And making that your intention, and that becomes the habit, and then the answers come, and everything flows. The resistance goes. If that makes any sense.
That makes total sense, and so much wisdom there with that.
Yeah, I think it's, we all want peace of mind, and we can have peace of mind by making that our habit, and not being taken in by the propaganda of the mind. Also, the inner judge is something that many people, including myself, have. And as Bible always says about the inner judge, it's a pathologically lying control freak with no sense of humor. If our partners would like that, we would drop them immediately. So I share the inner space. There's one desire only, which is to keep us small and hold us in the past. So being aware of what the inner judge is doing to mess up our lives is also a good place to start. And to find peace. So I think this time we're living in now, Corona story, is such an amazing, exciting time. Actually, I know it's not for everybody, but the people I'm talking to who can't go to work, and they actually are enjoying being at home. They're enjoying being in the formlessness. And finding rest, and then they suddenly feel that they're growing somehow. They're finding, as White says, in the absence of form, the soul is purring like a pussycat, because it can grow and expand and gently nudge the ego out of the driving seat, and as higher wisdom takes over, and it may ask for great change in our lives, change of direction even. But it'd be wonderful to make the most of this time now, where there is an opportunity to be with oneself and to see what one can do to find peace, inner peace. I don't think it has to be just a tragedy right now. It's a gift. It's a gift.
Yeah,
it's not a gift if you've lost loved ones who died as a result, or having money problems, but I understand that. But there's grace working somewhere through this. I've just posted a message from Michael on YouTube, in which he says that all these people with these different ideas about what is happening, nobody really knows, nobody understands, nobody has the answer. And so he said, when this happens, when everything is such a mystery, there's only one response to make, and that is, I smell God. Because only God can create such a mystery that nobody can solve, because of the gift in there to be able to discover the truth and what is happening in the higher power and the love and the potential for change, which we have to have. So,
well, I know as I'm listening to these conspiracy type things, they're reducing our meat supply. They're killing this. They're doing this. They made the coronavirus. You have all these things happening. Oh, they're trying to, control the world with this 5G. All these things whirling around. And where's the balance between, okay, what do I need to do to actually prepare myself so if these things start happening, but not go so much into worry about it? Does that make sense?
That's the thing, don't go into fear. The moment you go into fear, you're giving your power away. And again, Bible says, I quite like it, he said, people worry about who are the ones who have power. who are ruling our lives. The cabal is this is that. And he said, forget about the ones who rule, because they will only overrule. Turn your attention to the one who reigns. And that's where the true power is. And faced with God, these people are like straw in the wind. You know, it's their power is illusory, but they are there for a reason, to throw down the gauntlet, for us to take ourselves up to high levels of consciousness and to be without fear, to have what he calls the fearless, radiant heart. That's the gift they're bringing us to. In fact, I posted something beautiful this morning on Whitehall's Facebook page. He tells the story about a battle that the Native Americans were involved in the last century, the 19th century. And a famous brave, met the white general on the battlefield. And the Indian brave, said to the white general, we have been brothers before, and we will be brothers again, but this time I have to kill you. And so he killed him. And White was referring to what may have taken place between the souls of the man who was killed in the streets by the policeman and the policeman. What was the agreement between their souls? That out of that, some major transformation can come. Maybe this is the price they're paying, their sacrifice for something wonderful to happen.
So made me think that I feel that so much in my heart, you know, that what happened. But if it makes it so that people are more aware of the rights and the importance of people, and then it's
and as Jesus said, greater love hath no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friend. Maybe that was what this man was doing. But with the conspiracy theories, what came to me recently is that if we go back to the Middle Ages, where there were people living in little villages, there might be one woman living on her own who was busy with her herbs and nature things and trying to help people. You'd only need one person to not trust or have fear of her, to start gossiping about her, and then finally she'd be accused as being a witch and she'd be burned at the stake. And if you think of that on a much, much bigger scale, and while everything is connected so quickly around the world, in a way I feel these conspiracy theories are just gossip, evil gossip, which people start believing. And somehow the human mind enjoys gossip, enjoys feeding on these stories. I don't know whether your listeners, especially the ones in the States, are familiar with this tragic story of a little girl who was kidnapped, disappeared from a holiday resort in Portugal a few years ago. And there's been a huge story about it. And then people were saying that her parents and the friends who were with them were part of a paedophile ring. Somebody wrote a book about the father was seen carrying a bag that looked like a child into the beach. All these stories. And people are believing in this and thinking, oh yeah, of course the parents were involved and blah, blah. Well, finally, after 13 years, a man who's already in prison in Germany has been identified as the man who committed this murder. So these poor family were being accused of these terrible things by these conspiracy theorists. And I think one has to think, how would it be if somebody was doing that to you? Somebody made up a story about you. So it is like this extreme version of malicious gossip. That's how I see it. And people are very clever at telling stories and making people believe things that aren't true. I'm not going to say what I think is true or not. There's maybe a grain of truth in a lot of things, but it's also so dangerous to just believe what you read. And not really feel deeply within yourself, or what is true for me? Does this feel right? Yeah.
So with all this happening and also just with the work that you've done for 30, almost 40 years.
Yes.
What kind of shifts are you seeing happening in people?
Well, when I first started, I think 95% of the people who came were women. Now it's 50-50 men and women. And in the last few years, I've seen huge shifts in consciousness in men. And it's very encouraging to see. And in the early days, women would come and say, oh, my husband, he's so awful. He tells me I have to go out to work, and he doesn't believe in my meditation and my Reiki and this and that. And yeah, he says I have to earn money for the house. Now men are coming and saying, oh, my wife is such a nuisance. She keeps telling me I have to go and work, and all I want to do is to stay at home and meditate. And so the story has turned completely. And especially in the last couple of months with the corona crisis, I met several men who are loving being at home and loving having the freedom to meditate, and they want to be on their own. They want to indulge the hermit archetype in them. Mm-hmm. So there's a great shift in consciousness in men, I feel, and I think that's very important. And I do believe that it is the divine feminine, the feminine principle, that is going to save the world. But it's also the feminine in men. Mm-hmm. When men can allow their feminine side to show themselves, I think that is what's going to save the world. But there are big shifts in consciousness, and I think that the nature of questions of why people is asked has changed a lot since the early days. People are coming really who are deeply sincere about their own process of awakening and how they can set themselves free. So it's not so much about, shall we say, more domestic stuff. Now it's really people are feeling carried in this wave of new consciousness and wanting to start something new. Yeah, but the biggest change is in the men, and I find that very, very encouraging. I don't feel so lonely now. This kind of beliefs. Yeah, it's very special. Very special. Yeah.
When you have people coming to you and they're changing their consciousness and they're doing their meditation, so they're daily working on themselves, how does that change things like their relationships with other people and with themselves?
Well, it can change them very dramatically. And there are people who come who've had to end their relationships because they realize they have outgrown that archetype of being in the husband-wife role, whichever side it is. And actually the most important thing to them is to be free to allow their development to happen. And I know several cases where that has taken place. And it changes fundamentally one's life, and people are. I had quite a young man who was here quite recently with a young family, and he said, I can't do my work anymore. He was a businessman. I just can't do it. So from one day to another, he stopped his work, and his wife was horrified, of course, but he said, I can't betray myself any longer, being in this role that just isn't me. And satisfying other people's expectations, I have to bring out what is within me. So that's just one example of what can happen. And it takes a lot of courage to be really true to oneself. But I think that a lot of people have followed a path because it's what's expected of them, it's what society expects, it's what our education expects. We don't think that when we're in our 30s, 40s, or 50s that it'll be any different. And suddenly this change happens. And it really is an awakening, and they have to take this step of soul away from the biography they have known up till now.
Yeah, that's a huge step.
It's a huge step. It's very moving. In fact, I'm going to be giving a talk myself soon on YouTube, based upon a poem that has a line, "Thank God our time is now." Mm-hmm. And it's about the biggest stride of soul we ever took, which is what this time requires. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to be a lot of old foundations crumbling and a new way of living, of the opportunity to be true to oneself. As Weibel calls it, going from direction to dimension. Mm-hmm. And listening to the inner voice. But I'm very lucky, as far as I know, that, or maybe I will have to make a big step. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to end up living in a caravan somewhere. I don't know. Or in a tent. Or, I don't know what changes will come to me, but I hope I will see the grace in it when it happens and not resist it.
Yes. So,
Yes.
Ian, how can people get a hold of you? Why don't you share your website? And you have a YouTube channel that's about to be published. So,
Well, I'm just starting my YouTube channel, which is Ian Graham and White Bull, and I have a website, mankindkindman.org, which I'm not very good at keeping it up to date. So it's not much information there, except there's information about channeling to make an appointment and things like that. And White Bull has a Facebook page, which I think I gave you the link to that.
you do.
So people can follow him there also. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not very, I haven't till now been very out there with social media and so on. And the two books, the first one, God is never late but never early either, and the second one, There's Nothing Miraculous About a Miracle, they're going to be republished in English in a few months, I think. So that'll be notified on these sites I've mentioned. Just to tell you a quick story about the first book, of how things have happened. That complete strangers were telling me, you're going to be writing a book one day. I thought, what, me? What? This doesn't seem like what I could do. And from one day to another, suddenly I woke up and I thought, I've got to write a book. And then I thought, well, how? I don't have a computer. What am I going to do? 3 days later, I met somebody and she said, Ian, you don't have a computer, do you? I have a spare laptop. Why don't you have it? I'll give it to you. So, well, that's very nice, And I thought, okay, well, I know me. If I'm going to write, I need some time off, but I can't do that. I have to keep working. Within a week, somebody said to me, Ian, he said, White Bull's helped me a lot and my business is rather good. I think you deserve a break. I want to give you some money. Tell me how much you need and it's yours and you can do what you like with it. So within 10 days, I had the computer and the money. And then I know myself quite well. I know if I have the time and I have the money, I'm just going to, well, as they said about me at school, pass the time as time passes me. But then somebody said to me, oh, Ian, you're going to write a book. Why don't you come and stay in my guest house and I'll look after you and you can write your book. I'll cook for you and everything. So that happened. Within a week of finishing the book, I met a client. He said, oh, Ian, he said, I just had lunch with the head of a publishing firm in the Netherlands. Why don't you go and contact her? So I did. And I went to meet her. And I mean, this must be very rare in the publishing world. She just took my book and she held it. She said, I like the energy. We'll publish it. So when something has to happen, there's no way it couldn't have happened, that book. He was asking to be written. So.
For sure. That's awesome. I love that story.
Yeah.
So, well,
that's how people can contact me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and for all your wisdom and stories, and just appreciate you so much.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Kimberley, for inviting me. It's a real honor. I hope that I've been able to share something that will resonate with your listeners.
I think you have shared a lot of things. And just the last question I ask people, what makes an incredible life? What makes life amazing, extraordinary?
For me, number one, my friends. I have a wonderful circle of friends. I'm single and I'm happily single because all the love I need is what I have in my friendships. So that's very, very sacred to me. And I think just being able to see how grace has walked with me side by side and allowed my life to flow in a way that perhaps unlike anybody I know. I mean, I'm sure other people who have the same, but I just feel so blessed that, things have just happened. And especially because so many people are looking for something to do, they ask, well, what is my purpose? I never had to ask that question. It came to me. So I feel deeply blessed in that. And to be happy is well, peace of mind, faith. I come from this family where I grew up with all of these stories about how faith worked for them, and it works for me that whatever I need will come. and it always does. So, yeah, I think that's what's made life. It's not quite as wonderful as it used to be because I no longer have my dog with me. He was very special. But that, I think, basically is it. Wonderful friendships and being able to find God's fingerprints on everything that happens in my life, and the faith.
Well, thank you so much, and we will talk to you again soon.
Yeah, I'd love that. Thank you so much, Kimberly. Thank you.